G'day and welcome back to my workbench. Now look at the St. Louis. Oh, isn't she looking pretty now? That's a long cry from that brown chocolate thing that we had only a month ago, and it was only a few weeks ago she was all yellow covered in Steinerese. Now she's gilded, she's got the blue on, Fluer-De-Lys are all painted, the wood effects are in. Oh, I've gone to town on it. And this has been a lot of fun. And you'd think, that's really tricky, Harry, I could never do that. Well, mate, I can hardly see. I'm wearing 3 times bloody reading glasses just to see what I'm doing, and my hands shake because of the gout and the fact that I'm an old bastard, all right? There are tricks that I use to make all this happen. Anyone could do it. Would you like to know those? Would you like to find out how I accomplished all this and still did it even with my limitations and lack of skill? You would? All right then, roll the music. So just how am I achieving all these effects? By brush? Well, not really. Sure, I'm doing a little bit of brushing on of the liquid pigments to get me that wood effect. Yep, that is happening. I'm using a little bit of this dark star gold to paint some of the big areas. Sure, and occasionally I need to use my tiny little SMS and rosemary brushes to go and do some detail. But on the whole, I cheated. How did I cheat? Well, I did it all with paint pens. These things are incredible. I'm using Posca ones. Now, it's not like a texture marker that you might be used to. It's paint. It's acrylic paint with a little bit of alcohol in there, I think. And they have some very fine nibs. These are by Molotow, same guys that do the liquid chrome, you know, that's in a pen that we can use to touch up chrome on sprues. It's absolutely fantastic. Same sort of thing, but this time it's gold. Now that's a big fat one, which I'll use on the Fluer-De-Lys, that sort of thing, anywhere that's kind of big. I just need to slather some on. Then I've got a medium-sized Molotow, which is kind of handy for any sort of bigger areas like little cherubs and things that need doing. But then when I need to get down to some fine work, like when I'm doing the Fluer-De-Lys and doing tiny little gold edges on things and tiny little ridges and everything, I have this Posca pen. Now, this goes down to an incredibly fine point. You can get less than 1 millimeter wide lines if you're very gentle. And the thing is, the paint is flowing into that nib. So you actually have to be very careful you don't flood it. When you're using it, it's best to use it horizontal or a little bit up sometimes, because I found if you're using it like that, you'll find the paint all floods down and blots out. Easy enough to wipe up as you go, but once it's dry, it's there for good. So you sort of have to plan and be careful and watch what you're doing, because you don't really get much of a second go once you've put it on. So you can see some of the gilding I've already put on here, and it really is quite easy. So you would just lightly run the pen. You hardly touch, you don't push too hard at all. Almost like painting, in that, you know, you're not pushing down hard, you're just letting the thing happen. But you can see the amount of control I've got. At least for me, I find it easier to draw than to paint. It's always been that way. I'm more of a drawer. And I'm doing this 2 hands in the air, although admittedly I'm holding one hand against another, which is a trick, so that you can basically get things. So, you know, you can get down to tiny little details like this. I need to use these triangular shaped brush handles to get some grip, because my hands are not that steady and I have to hold one against the other. But the pens, maybe it's a psychological thing, I'm just used to a pen. But I'm finding these Posca pens and these Molotow pens an absolute godsend. So let me show you what else I can do with them. Hey Pluto, come and see me paint a boat. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm really trying hard not to touch the model now. So I've got this Mickey Mouse glove on. So these lines here, which I put on first, these brown lines, right, from a Posca pen, I put those on first so then I could run my washes for the wood effects into them, because I knew I wouldn't be able to paint right into the grooves on the edges. So I ran my washes in and they literally flooded up, and I can actually pull, as I did with this one, I could actually pull the wash on the edge and that would darken, blend, and then my Posca line, which is only on the outside, blends in. And I get away with my inability to be able to exactly get into the lines. And here I painted this by hand just with a brush, but I just slathered that all the way through. And then I came back with a pen and I did all the surrounds of the counterports. Easy as that, okay? And I'll show you shortly how I did all the Fluer-De-Lys, got them to basically pop up and sit in those little blue rectangles. In fact, this little blue rectangle here, it was very easy, but I'll talk about that in a sec. What I'm going to show you now is, okay, how would I use a Posca pen, say, to continue this line here? I think there's a line there that needs doing that should be brown. So you give these things a bit of a shake up, and the trick is, again, not pointing down, pointing up, because otherwise the paint goes everywhere. So here it is. You can activate them by pushing. You can see that one's already ready to go. And this pen I get quite a fine line on, which was a bother because I started doing these wale lines on the kit with a brown called Cocoa, which I thought would be good. But then when I put my wood effects on, it was too insipid. So I had to go to this one, which was dark brown. I haven't been able to get that in a wide nib. So what I found is you have to go sideways. So what you do is you place the nib on there sideways and you run it along. And you can use the natural edges on the model to basically get the shape. Get as close as I can, just using the edge. Well, once that is up and the way that you're going to look at it, that line is going to be perfect, be no problem at all. So what happens then is we'll run the wood effects through there and underneath, and they will all just blend in. As you can see here, wood effects have blended all in to my Posca pen lines. So it really is quite easy. I'll get on and finish that, and then I'll show you how we do those wood effects. Okay, now I've made a splodge there, okay? So you need to address that immediately. Otherwise, well, the only other way is I'd have to touch that up. So what I do is a slightly wet cotton bud. Now, here I'm working in browns anyway, and I've got a brown stain to go on there, so I'll get away with that. You really wouldn't want that going into, say, a white area. In the cases where I splodged and went into the white here, the off-white, I really could mop it up, but it was still there. I had to wait till it dried and then touch up again with the paint. But luckily, things do cover. So I'll now have to wait for that to dry, and then I can retouch up my Posca pen, and then we'll get in with our wash. I had the chance to get this off camera so I can get the right angle and go up and down until I got all those edges the way I wanted. This is why I don't have the model all assembled at this point, because I want to turn and get in and look at this way and look at it that way, and the only way I know how to do that is to have the part in my hand. Now, there's a little problem here where I can't get the pen into that tiny gap, okay? This pen is too fat. So one trick I found is, and also while you're working with your pen, don't forget to shake a bit of paint onto it, because you shake the paint, it actually goes down in the nib. So if I put the paint on the tip of this brush, it's cooperating, I think it is, I should be able to I haven't done a very good job of it, but you get the idea. I can actually use the brush to paint and fill in any gaps, which I'm going to have to touch up now because I've made a bit of a mess of that. That's all right. I can get in there with a little bit of Steiner on either side and touch that up. But these are little things, right? The odd bit of touching up is to be expected in anything that you do. But 99% of that is a nice straight line that I wouldn't be able to do with a paintbrush because I simply don't have the steadiness of my hands or the hand-eye coordination now because, you know, I'm getting old. Things are getting wobbly and my eyesight's kind of blurry. So that allows me to basically get these sort of things drawn out. And as it dries, I'll see I need to do some touching up as well. That's okay. So I'll get all that done and also put a tiny bit of Strakes in there to touch up where I splotched. That won't take long to dry, and we'll get on with doing the wood wash. Now, accomplishing this blue panel here with all these little Fluer-De-Lys. First, I tried to hand paint it in with the brush because, it didn't seem too hard. The edges were ridged and you could push up against them. But what I found is all these little raised Fluer-De-Lys here, they kept bumping my brush and I ended up with wobbly edges. It just wasn't happening. So I ended up just scrubbing that, repainting in all the edges with Strakes. And then I masked this all up. It really wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard at all to sort of mask around these edges. And then using my custom mix of blue, which I've used everywhere else in this model, which is a slightly sort of reddish blue. It's a slight French blue. It's the one that matched what I wanted when I did my colour palette. I airbrushed that on very carefully in a very dry solution, so it wasn't too wet to sort of, not too much thinner to flood. And I put on a couple of coats of that, got it on nice and smooth, and then I could come back and pick out the Fluer-De-Lys. And now I can very carefully get in there with a tiny little point on this. Can mark out a Fluer-De-Lys. I'm better if I'm working that way, because I can feel it starting to flood. So I can pick those out. I go through and I can pick all those out. And even when it came down to these tiny little edges here, I could basically just carefully run or tap it along and get those all done. It really wasn't that hard. And I've got little cherubs up here to do. Probably could use the slightly wider one to do those. But I can, a couple of strokes, I'll pick those out. It's really not that hard. I love it. I just feel I've got so much more control. And the gold is very nice. It's very convincing. The gold is gold. It's not just a pretend one. You often get them and they're really a bit flat. So you see, it actually glistens. Look at that. You can see the reflections in the gold. It's terrific stuff. I really love it. All right, let's get on with some of the rest of the model. Now, I haven't done the best job along here. I was leaving that the wood effect, and I was using the wider gold pen, and I kind of slopped down. It's before I got the finer ones. So I've decided I'm going to go the red colour here. I'm just going to slop that in. I'm not going to be too worried about my edges. I'll try to get them. I'm not worried at all about those cherubs. This is the beauty of using these pens, is I am not worried. Those pens will cover up all mistakes. Hopefully. Well, they will. So I just want paint right to the edges. Now the paint has dried in this section. We can try and pick out those little gold lines there. So very carefully with the Posca pen. As long as you don't look too close, it's not bad. I'm going to put a wash on that still, and that might just blend in a few little edge pieces, but that's much better than I could have done with a hairy brush, so I'm pretty happy. And it didn't take that long, really. Probably that whole thing took about 10 minutes for me to gild. So I like that. It's quick. The job is not bad. In the hands of a more skilled person, probably would be brilliant, but I can get away with that. I think that's doable. Now I'm going to put a wash on my window glass. It was just painted with, it's actually dunkel grey. It's just a very grey well, that sort of medium grey colour that I had here, a life colour, and it wasn't too dark, it wasn't too light, it was just a medium grey. That's all I wanted to do to get the windows in, and they were all blocked in with the blues and everything, and then I painted the gold effects over. Now I'm going to use, this is called Wood Deck Darkener. Now that other one that I use, that's a Wood Deck Shadower, but this one is actually like a green. It's quite a dark green. So I'm going to get some of that, and it's a wash. I'll slop it in there, and you might start to see what's happening. Okay, I might have a little bit too much in there. Now I'm not too worried about the gold because I can always touch the gold up again. What I really want to get is, I want to get the effect of all the cross hatching in that window. So we'll need to let that dry and we'll come back, but you should then be able to see all the tiny little engraved little LED light edges, and that should make those windows, look very realistic. Now I want to continue with the wood effects on the side of the hull because it goes wood all the way down to basically, well, it's not quite a plimsoll line, but this little line here before we get the white anti-fouling paint. Now, to break it up, because otherwise it'd just be all this sort of oaky, orangey sort of wood, I did this strip in here slightly darker. I ran 2 coats through there and really pushed hard with the pigments. This one here I did a much lighter coat, and I even went over with some salt wash to lighten it. So it just had a slight demarcation. So this one here I want to do dark. So we'll do that now, and I'll be using the Wood Shadower again, Wood Deck Shadower. Now the pigments settle to the bottom, so you've got to dig deep. You've got to push right in, which normally you wouldn't do. Give it a good stir, and then dig out what's going to be fairly dark. And this brush is just about the right size to run through here. Bit of fingerprint grease there. That's the trouble. Really should be only handling the model with the gloves once you sort of get to these sort of stages. But you can't. It can't be helped. Now this stuff, you just slather it on. It doesn't matter if I go over my Posca pen lines. They can all be touched up. That is not a problem. In fact, what I want is I want it to slather right into the edges there, because that is where I'm going to, that is where I'm going to get a dark effect with this, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Now, if you've seen me use this stuff before, you know that as you work it, the pigments activate. So as we go, the pigments start to pop out. If you just leave it, they kind of fall just into the holes, into the little gaps. But if you work it as it's drying, you get some interesting effects. I literally have no more paint on the brush. I'm just simply playing with it, seeing if I can get some texture effects to happen. And sometimes it turns out really nice. If it doesn't work, you can pull it off. You've got a remover and it will remove 100%. Alright, well, we'll see how that dries, but I think that's going to dry a nice dark colour like there. I'll need to extend that through here into the prow and this part of the ship on the bow here, or the prow. I'm going to use this same effect. I may have to come and touch up again with yellow Styrene, don't know. Okay, I need to let that sit down level so that it can flow through. Could switch to another pointy brush at this stage, because you can only do so much with a great big flat brush. Let's see if I can get that to run nicely along that edge. So I've left that a few minutes to dry. It's nearly there, but you can see I'm getting a slightly different band colour, or a slightly different shade to the one above it. So I've got a light wood and then a slightly darker wood. It's only a subtle difference, but it's one that is going to break up that hull so it's not all the same all the way through. Alright, I'll continue on now, and I'm just going to basically put the effect onto the lower section here, but I'll do it lightly. I won't dig so deep into the pigments. Getting quite a nice effect now that's drying, and it's just slightly darker, so I'm getting at least the dark, light, dark, and I'll be able to do light here. Now this will all need a clear coat, because this stuff, these liquid pigments, are still reactive all the time. That's why you can strip them off, and even the sweat from your fingers will sometimes lift if you push down too hard with a finger. I've done it, I've gone, oh, happened on the bounty. I went, oh dear. So I've left this, doing this wood until the absolute last bit of painting the hull. This is the last blocking in. I may need to come back and detail paint a few things, but this will be blocked in. And the idea is I will give this all a sealing flat coat once I'm finished today. Well, once it's dried anyway. And that will lock those colours in. So I've got to get to a point where I'm happy, because that will be a point of no return. Once I seal it in, there's not much I can do other than add colour over the top of it. But it should be alright. Okay, I'm going to do the lower part now, and I'm just going to use the top part of the pigment. I won't shake the bottle up. So let's do that. There she is, all painted up. So that lighter colour has worked, the darker colour there with the wood effect has worked, and then I've got my other corresponding layers, and they all harmoniously work together. And the whole colour palette is really blended nicely. And it, you know, if you saw the earlier videos, you know I went to all the trouble of working out my colour palette and adjusting colours until I found a balance of colours that I thought would look nice together. And it pays off in the end. Nothing worse than just picking colours at random, because that's what it says in the instructions, and then basically you get halfway into the thing, you think, gee, this looks gaudy, and then you try and repair it. Being a graphic artist, I work at my colour palette first. A couple of other things I did that weren't in the instructions is I continued this off-white section through here. They sort of had this all gilded, but for my way of thinking, this line graphically or artistically needs to run all the way through. And so I even painted a little bit of the off-white in the bottom there, and I painted the blue in the top of these. So I've continued the lines and the flow, and I think that looks a lot better. Who knows if it's historically correct? We don't have any photos of this ship. I don't think we had cameras back in the 1600s. In fact, I'm sure we didn't. But it all kind of works, and my windows now that you can't really see it from this distance, but believe me, if you got up close, you would see that that green wash, that very dark, almost like lamp black green wash, has popped out all the little window frames. So they come up really well. Everything's worked, everything's good. I think I've forgotten to put a bit of gold on there. I'll do that. There's going to be little things that I've missed and forgotten, but I can touch those up and do those as I go. Not a problem. What I need to do now is put a flat coat on the wood areas to seal them in, and without hopefully splashing too much into the gilded areas. But as you saw, it's pretty easy to pick up your pen and away you go. Now just one last tip for doing this section here, because you'll see, although that is all the one sort of yellowy brown colour, it has got a few little streaks and things in it, but they're subtle. They're nowhere near as obvious and obtuse as along here, where I dabbed in. You saw me basically breaking that up and getting all those lines. To get this effect here, you've got to do a continuous run all the way from bow to stern, one stroke all the way through, and then you do it again and you do it again. Anytime you want to do an effect, you run it through. You can sort of angle it a bit or whatever, but you need to keep that stroke going through. If you stop, you get a big sort of dirty mark. I've got sort of one there that I managed to basically work out, but it is a continuous stroke all the way through. So if you're using this wash, that's the trick there. That is a continuous stroke. This is dabbing it in, and like that there was a continuous stroke all the way through. Although I could have worked it a bit more, because I've got a much nicer effect down here, so I might look at that. As a bit of one of my little touch-up jobs. But you sort of want to leave well alone. If it looks okay, don't mess with it. A lot of people ask me why there's a plesiosaur in the shot every now and then. It's for scale, obviously, isn't it? So you get an idea of scale. It's a 1/144th plesiosaur. Maybe. It's just there for a little bit of artistic fun, and David Eves gave it to me, and I'm still trying to figure out what to use it in. So every time I do something nautical, plesiosaur just comes in to have a little look, you know, just like the cat sniffing boxes. Anyhow, that's where I'm going to leave the St. Louis for this video. It's 99% there. There's a little bit of touching up, but that hull half is done. I've got to replicate all that work on the other side, and then I can start buttoning this up, gluing the decks in, putting in the pedestals, those sort of things, but that's for the next video. If you've enjoyed what you've watched, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and then you won't miss the next video. And if you'd really like to help me out, then why not click the link to my Patreon page, where from as little as $1 a month, you can see the videos early and advert free, so that's really good. And it just helps me out with a few shekels so that I can continue my hobby and presenting all these videos on YouTube, because they do take a lot of time. I spent about 30 hours producing this video so far. Yep, they do take time. All right, well, that's enough waffle now. That's everything that I can do in this video. We'll come back. There'll be lots more. Oh, you never know what I'm going to do next. I don't know what I'm going to do next. All right, that's it. I'm waffling. I'm delirious. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.